I sat on the bathroom floor at my job and wept hard, like snot and sobbing, eyes red, hyperventilating. I was in a space of fear, frustration, and fatigue that I had never felt before. Was this an anxiety attack? Was I panicking? Was I breaking down? I needed grounding. I needed support. And in that moment, welcome back to Here We Are, the mindful podcast for millennials, where it's all about remembering where we've been, knowing where we're going, and taking up space in the present through the art of storytelling. I'm your host, Teka, and I'll tie together the practice of presence, life lessons, and mental health nuggets too. Whether sharing my own experiences or featuring a special guest, I hope to inspire you to take control of your story and take control of your life. I hope you receive what you need from today's episode, and remember to check out the show notes for links I reference. Today's episode is about leaps of faith, and the story you just heard was the beginning of a blog post from my blog, Teka.com. Let's hop into some more of that story and get some lessons from it as well. On the phone with a close friend, I repeated how exhausted and stressed I was, overwhelmed and underfulfilled. I had reached my breaking point. Sent home to take a self-care day and gather myself, I had plenty of time to reflect on that moment and take a nap. This was one heck of an experience. And in that experience, I made a decision for my present and future self. I needed a sabbatical. In the back of my mind, the same gentle whisper that I've heard before repeated the same affirmation. You're too creative for this. You see, for weeks, probably months, I felt this nudging from the spirit. You know the place your mind goes when you picture yourself truly fulfilled in your purpose and profession? The days of creating in your divine power and leading an impact that changes lives. My mind and heart would follow that voice, seduced by the prophetic image of my best self living my best life. I knew it was for me, eventually. Little did I know I had been taking leaps of faith in that direction my entire life. So what I just read was an excerpt from a blog post titled Leaps of Faith on my blog, Teka.com. If you can believe it, I wrote that post 3 years ago, February of 2020, and it was a documentation of sorts of a leap of faith that I took and was pretty significant to where I am now. I had quit my job, y'all. I was working in the hospital setting for about 2 years, and I decided that I needed to quit my job without a plan B at that, because I was feeling pretty burnt out. I was doing my job well, but I was feeling unfulfilled. I felt like God was calling me to something greater. I was scared though, because back then, quitting your job, especially in the last 5 years, right? The economy, the financial crisis, people were not promoting and glamorizing quitting your job and hopping into entrepreneurship like they are now. And as a single woman in my 20s, technically, I could not afford to quit my job. I had bills, I had responsibilities, and I was taking care of myself. But one of the things I know for sure is that I was not relying on myself to get me to the place where my faith was calling me to. I was relying solely on God. So in order to get there, I had to surrender. I had to surrender my idea of what success was. I had to surrender who I thought others wanted me to be. I had to surrender the plan and the path I had come up with on my own. I really had to surrender my strength. All of the ways that I was trying to almost force myself towards my purpose. So let's talk about surrender and trusting God. I'm going to come at this from two perspectives, both a psychological perspective as well as a spiritual perspective. If you know me, you know by trade and training, education, I'm a psychotherapist, I'm a writer, I'm a creator. I was trained to be a mental health therapist. But I also believe that part of my divine purpose and the gift that God has given me is to marry the two, right? Mental health and ministry. So I definitely believe that as a therapist, I can integrate my faith and my spiritual practices to help support the psychological coping skills and tools and practices that I'm taking and utilizing. So I said all that to say, let's hop in and define what it means to surrender. So I'm going to start us off with an article from Psychology Today, written by Nancy Collier, LCSW, and she's also a reverend. It's titled, When It's Time to Let Go of Control and Surrender. One of the first things that she highlights is that surrender is at the heart of all spiritual paths. No practice is more powerful or profound. But what does it mean to surrender? And what does it not mean? So let's start off with what surrendering is not. It's not failure or defeat. Surrender is not punishment. It's also not a decision to let go. Surrender is not a task that we can accomplish with our mind. It's not a state that we can will ourselves into. Surrender is not a decision to be comfortable with what is, right? It's not an ending. It's not a bad thing. But surrender is the following. Every one of us at some point encounters a situation that rocks the foundation of who we are and what we think we can bear. Something that pushes us past our limits. Sometimes it's a situation we've lived with for a long time, and sometimes it's a sudden event that overwhelms us and for which our usual coping strategies are useless. While the content may differ, what these experiences share is the power to bring us to our knees, figuratively and often literally. And it's the power to change us. Thank you, Nancy, and Psychology Today. So you heard in the story that I shared at the beginning of this episode that I was literally sobbing that ugly cry on the bathroom floor of my job. That was the situation that rocked the foundation of who I was and what I thought I could bear. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. Now, as a situation that literally brought me to my knees, I am grateful for the perspective that it gave me. In the moment, it required me to reflect. You see, growing up, I was more than likely often told that I was going to be a leader, that I was going to have my PhD, that I was going to be a prophet to the nations, that I was going to be the super successful person in whatever area of my career and life that God called me to. And although the encouragement, the well wishes, the life that people spoke into me, it did add a little bit of pressure. And so in an effort to live up to those expectations that people may have put on me, the unrelenting ones, and especially being told that life was supposed to look a certain way in order for it to be deemed successful, whether friends, society, family, or even social media. I was trying to control what that looked like. And so in the social work field, I was going along one of the many paths. I started working and volunteering in the schools. I moved to the hospitals. I had worked in the community. And I was at a point where I was like, okay, on the outside, this looks successful. but it doesn't feel successful, if that makes sense. I knew that I could no longer reject or resist what was actually supposed to be my life's purpose journey. In our effort to control, I'm sure a lot of us can say that we set up these plans, we create these blueprints, we write out these goals, and we're like, all right, God, this is how my life is going to go. This is how my life is supposed to go. And I'm sure God is laughing. You know how they say, tell God your plans if you want him to laugh, or whatever the saying goes. So I'm sure God was laughing because he's like, look at my kids thinking they know it all. In order to move forward in my journey, I had to surrender. And I had to admit that I didn't know it all and that I wasn't actually allowing God to be involved in my life plans. But in order to involve God in my plans, we had to have a relationship. Now, don't get me wrong. I grew up in the church. I know God, and I've had a relationship with him for a really long time. But there was a season in my life, the season I'm referencing, where I found it hard to trust. There were people in my life that had betrayed me, that had hurt me, and I may have been letting those beliefs, based on those other experiences, beliefs that people are unreliable, untrustworthy, maybe that was rolling over into my beliefs about God. I mean, it happens. Could you imagine if a young woman grew up with a father who was unreliable and then was told that she was supposed to rely on Father God? It would be hard for her. So I had to recognize that where my fear and doubt in God ended, there my trust and faith began. But it wasn't easy. You know, I had to look back at my relationship with God and really call forth to that present moment evidence of the ways that he has covered me and protected me, ways that he's comforted me and provided for me. All of those memories was evidence that I could trust him, that I could have faith in him. And, you know, honestly, it was also me remembering all of the ways as a young kid, as an adolescent, even in my early 20s, that I was tapped in to that creative side of me, that creative side that mirrored and reflected the creator, Big C. That part of me was longing to come forth again. And so that leap of faith was not just for me in 2019, but I believe it was for younger me as well. So in that surrender, cultivating that relationship and strengthening my trust and faith really cultivated a closeness. And during that time of my leap of faith where I had no job, I was driving Lyft every now and then to kind of make ends meet. Me and God got really acquainted. He knew the cries that I would release when I was unsure of how I was going to pay my bills. God knew the heart desire that I had to tap into that creativity again, but not knowing what direction to go. God even knew who to align me with when it came to building the foundation of getting back on track with the purpose journey he had for me. And I'm really grateful for that because it reflects and solidifies the fact that God really does want the best for us and he wants to prosper us, but we have to trust him. We have to let him be involved, you know? Now, in terms of our spiritual practices, the article from Psychology Today touched on some of it, but I was reading a article or an answer on this website called gotquestions.org. And it was talking about what surrender means to God. Now, if you don't believe in God, you have a higher power or a spiritual connection that grounds you. Think of it this way. There are different levels of surrender, right? You have to first believe that your higher power wants to gift you with their presence, with their purpose for you. There's the first level of belief, right? In Christianity, the next level is that we have to remember that we can't do anything to earn the grace of God. It's gifted to us. The third level, which is where I feel like I was at, is where surrender requires a deeper intimacy. When you have a higher power or divine that you believe in, that you trust, it takes intimacy to let them into your life and give them control over your plans. But allowing them to control or even conquer your plans is for your best interest. It benefits you, it blesses you. And that deep intimacy and level of surrender is a daily choice, of course, but it also requires wholly surrendering, meaning we can't surrender partially. I mean, think about it. In war, have you ever heard of a side of the war partially surrendering to the other? Like, all right, we gonna let y'all win halfway, but we're gonna keep the other half, right? No. You have to surrender wholly. There has to be one winner, one person in control. And so that daily choice, even though it is imperative, I know it's not easy because some days we want to take control back, right? Especially when we don't know what's to come. That uncertainty can lead to anxiousness, nervousness, worry, right? And whenever we worry or we're anxious, it tends to be the only thing we can focus on. That surrender grounds us and brings us back to the present. It helps us to say, in the here and now, I can breathe a sigh of relief that I don't have to carry or decide or control all on my own. What a relief it is. What a release it is. Breathing in that now, coming back to the present, even today for me, doing this podcast, I'm trusting God to divinely guide how this goes and who needs to hear it. So every day, surrender is a choice. So looking back and reflecting on that story, right? Looking at where I've come from and realizing that surrender and these leaps of faith have been integral parts of getting me to where I am today. And I hope that that encourages you as much as it's encouraged me. It almost reignites my trust and my faith that where I am now is where I'm supposed to be, and where I'm going, even if I don't know, is for my good. And that I can trust it because I can gather the evidence, that I can rely on who and what I trust and have faith in. All right, so now it is time for the gift of the episode. If you remember last episode, I did gift at the beginning, but today we're doing it at the end. Remember that G stands for gratitude or goal, and my gratitude is in knowing that God has always planned to prosper me and still plans to prosper me and let everything be for my good. The I is for intention, and my intention is to release any unhelpful beliefs and to make room for all that is meant for me. F is for faith or focus, and I have to trust that my leaps of faith are steps in the journey of my purpose. You know, knowing that my purpose is not a destination or a pinnacle I reach, but that it is my life's journey and walk and the evidence of God using me, no matter where I am in that journey. And then the T is for take action. I want to write down one way I want to leap in faith again in 2023. Yes, the podcast counts as a leap of faith, but I'll write down one more for good measure. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It was titled Leaps of Faith, but I realized I was talking a lot about surrender, but I believe the two are connected. And I want to leave you with some reflective questions. First, I want you to look back. Ask yourself, do I have evidence that I can trust and have faith in my higher power? And then, based on those answers, ask yourself, do I still trust them and have faith today? Then the last one I want to leave you with is, how can I take a leap of faith this year? Fully trusting, fully surrendering. Before we go, I want to share the end of this blog entry with you. It was actually an affirming journal entry that has and will continue to keep me grounded and focused, and I hope that it does for you too on your journey ahead. It reads, on this journey, I have and will continue to trust God, to take heed to the Holy Spirit, and to trust my voice. I especially have to trust myself. Imposter syndrome is real. Even on this faith journey, I've had moments of doubt and self-sabotage, believing that I'm not smart, creative, known, secure, whole enough to do what I'm called to do. But a whisper reminds me, I am called and qualified. My faith will require leaps and jumps like never before, but I'm not taking these jumps alone. I have been blessed with an amazing ecosystem of sister friends that speak to the greatness in me. They see who I already am and the powerhouse I will be. They see and call to me, and I need to respond. I realize that any self-doubt, self-sabotage, insecurity, fear, inadequacy, procrastination, and shrinking is a lie of only the enemy's scheming brain. I release all of it. I radiate confidence, preparation, fortitude, tenacity, resiliency, knowledge, aptitude, intelligence, organization, and presence that shifts the atmosphere of rooms, changes lives, and impacts the world. Ashe. Thank y'all so much for listening to Here We Are, the mindful podcast for millennials. Let's connect on Instagram at the Here We Are Pod and on YouTube at Here We Are Pod. If you're loving the podcast so far, I'd be so honored if you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave me a review. Remember, breathe in the present moment. Take care.